Okay.
All
Debbie
right,
just
well,
came on. She said that there is, she didn't realize about the time change, and she said this has been recorded, so none of us
well,
thought about it at the
thanks for
beginning.
bringing that up, Debbie. 'Cause, well, I mean, I have been taking notes, but it certainly won't be as specific as
Yeah.
as that. But that's okay. We're recording now.
So, okay, so there it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did go into some detailed terminology and so on. Let me see if I can get this little thing out of the way. So I kind of started back with the human-animal bond, which I believe we did talk about defining later. But in the other areas, I tried to not stray too far from what was kind of the currently established, yet ambiguous terms, because I think the more we do, the harder it's going to be to have our terminology or definitions accepted by the community at large. So, but I did come up with some different terminology. So across the top, we have a human-animal bond. As I said, I think we're talking about that later. And then moving into more human-animal interactions, which I feel include everything from service animals to veterinary care, zoos, humane, welfare, public and military assistance animals, etc. So the animal assisted interventions, or what we've previously termed animal assisted interventions, kind of goes across the top then. And I used kind of the format based on a model Amy had provided, and then also included many of the thoughts that Daniela expressed. So the animal assisted interventions, then I do prefer, it didn't matter to me before, but since our discussions, I do prefer animal assisted interactions over animal assisted interventions for the same reasons that others have expressed. And I think one advantage to using animal assisted interactions is it could use the same, initials, AAI, and it would be kind of an easy switch. And then the columns going, do I have the right thing shared here? Can you see?
Yeah, it's okay.
Can you see the graph, the yellow and tan graph?
Yeah.
Okay, so like Amy's, the vertical yellow columns refer to a specific type of intervention. Animal assisted therapy. What I did was include only OT, PT, speech and rec there, because it seems to me that animal assisted interventions in mental health has really grown a great deal. And so I created a new and separate column to identify the mental health practitioners that apply animal assisted interactions, separated out from the physical health related therapies. So animal assisted counseling or animal assisted mental health might be ideas there. The next column includes the education, of course, and then equine assisted therapy or equine assisted learning are the areas that I'm least familiar with. So I question my definitions and categorizations in those areas. And then animal assisted activities, I like the idea of just referring those to animal assisted visits, because that's primarily what's going on. I think the word activity really implies that there's some kind of task or project or some other action that's actively happening beyond a social visit. So I think changing it to animal assisted visits makes that a little clearer. And then lastly, the specialty programs such as crisis response, PRISM programs, courtroom dogs, and things like that. And then looking down at the human partners in those different areas, each of them, I like the idea that each of them kind of be titled by animal assisted occupational therapist, equine assisted social worker, etc. So those are some examples there. And then The next row is for credentialed handlers, like for example, through Pet Partners handlers and so on, that might be working alongside a professional. They could be a therapy assisted or therapy assisting handler or therapy assisting dog or therapy assisting team. And then if you wish, you could put volunteer or professional in there. So a registered handler that goes with the dog they own to work in a support group led by a licensed practitioner, might be a counseling or coaching assisting team, so that it's there's more clarity in those areas. And then for others, for staff or others who might have training or education, but not credentialing in animal assisted interactions, or doesn't hold a license and isn't a handler, animal assisted specialist could maybe be used to imply that they're the person that is working alongside someone that's implementing equine assisted therapies, for example, but they aren't the therapist or practitioner. So I really like therapy assisting animals. Someone mentioned last week or a couple weeks ago, as opposed to therapy animal and then therapy animal assisting team. And then separating out whether they're therapy assisting, counseling assisting. I have teams in my group who might assist a counselor 1 week and then be working in a PT or OT session next. So depending on the venue, then they would be assisting in those specific areas. And then animal assisted visits would be a visiting animal or a visiting animal team. I just really like kind of that clarification that they are not involved in therapy per se. That's all.
Nice. That's great. Anyone have any thoughts or comments on that, on Laura's?
So Laura, I'm looking, specifically at your AA visits and AASP because that's what I'm involved in. So you've got the visiting animal team. What if, okay, that covers all volunteer handlers basically, right? And no matter what they're doing, even if they're working with a professional, but they're not the professional themselves, right?
If they were working with a professional, then they would be these, whoops, I can't do it. The last 2 rows, they would be a therapy assisting team if they were helping an OT or PT, or a counseling assisting team.
Okay, even if
they were
themselves
just doing visits, then it would be a visiting animal team.
Okay,
or visiting
so even
animal.
if the handler is not a professional, but if they're working with a professional, then they're the therapy assisting team, right?
I like that because I think it does differentiate between the more casual meet and greet activities and the trained role as a handler in treatment sessions. And I think since Pet Partners, has 10,000, 15,000 handlers, many of whom are volunteers that do the nursing home visits, or probably the bulk of them do more of the casual meet and greets, that does kind of specify that they are involved in an animal assisted therapy counseling session.
Right, and then it would be the
Working
same
with a
thing, obviously.
professional.
The same thing in an educational setting, education
Right.
assisting animal or education assisting team. Okay.
Right.
Got
So
it.
if they're in a
Thank you.
classroom working on academic applications with the educator,
Mhm.
then they would be an education assisting team.
Okay, I appreciate you addressing all of those scenarios, whether or not everybody agrees we need that many terms. I appreciate you looking
I
at the
know
volunteers.
there are a lot of terms, but I think it
because
clears a lot of things up.
That's the point of view I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does that?
I had a question. It's just the HAI,
Yes.
human animal interactions, and then the AA is animal assisted interactions.
Right.
I'm wondering if that would be a little confusing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I didn't object to the term intervention before 2 weeks ago. And when people had indicated, that intervention does sometimes imply a very abrupt kind of confrontational
Yeah.
thing. I just thought that would be an easy switch because the term interaction is already with human animal interaction, but now they're animal assisted specifically. I thought it would make it easier.
Yeah, the question makes it easier or harder because people are so used to AAI being interventions.
I don't know.
It's a big question.
Well, it was interaction before. When I was taught years ago in Pet Partners, AAI was animal assisted interaction.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
it changed to intervention at some point.
Okay.
And that was one of the things I brought up. I don't want to jump in on what you're
Yeah,
doing.
right,
Some
Laura, I
things I don't know.
remember.
Also, your last column, which I believe is animal assisted, is that social programs, the SP?
Specialty programs, and
Specialty,
I don't
okay.
have any strong feelings about that. I think that's what was used in some of your other documents, specialty
Okay.
programs. I think Pet Partners is using that now to refer to crisis response and some of those other.
Okay, because I haven't seen that on their site. That's what I based my information
Oh,
from.
okay, okay.
And
Yeah.
and we do, we have dogs, not quite in the courtroom yet where we are, but in
Right.
pretrial work. And we do have crisis response dogs with different levels
Right.
of training. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
And really those activities still fall into the casual AAI visit.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
whether or not you separate them out, I don't have a strong feeling either way.
Yeah, and I
But
don't
what we're
either.
doing in the courtroom and in the crisis response actually is still more of the visitation kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that input.
No, thank you for thinking this out so thoroughly. I appreciate that because I've had trouble coming up with terminology that I would want to support for the volunteer side of things.
Mhm, mhm.
Any other thoughts? Okay.
May I launch into just what I want to say briefly since
Yes,
Laura
of course
brought
you
up the
Absolutely.
volunteer aspect?
Great
Um,
segue.
So I believe.
Amy, can
Go
you
ahead.
unshare me then? Unless Laura wanted it
I think
left
you have
up.
to.
I-
I think you have to unshare.
I
Laura.
can't, it's right here. I was looking for it everywhere, but right where it is. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you. So I believe I'm the only one representing the volunteer point of view. Is that correct, of everybody involved?
You're the expert.
Well, remember what a volunteer is, right? So I am actually very interested in all the things you've been discussing from a professional point of view. It's interesting to me to see that. So as I said, I do represent the volunteer point of view. I'm a registered handler with Pet Partners, and I'm part of a local Pet Partners organization, but we're quite large. We have almost 200 members just in Colorado. So I go with the terms that Pet Partners uses and has taught me, and I'm not displaying those because it's a relatively short list of everything you've mentioned already. The term I was taught years ago was animal assisted interaction. That got changed to intervention at some point. Animal assisted therapy, animal assisted education, animal assisted activity, animal assisted crisis response. And lately they've come up with the terms animal assisted workplace well-being because there are a lot of requests for volunteer visits to the workplace. And then animal related engagement, which I think I first saw over the last few years when COVID kept us from visiting in person and we started to do Zoom visits, or we started to visit outside the window even. Animal related engagement became a term. So I also brought up the being dissatisfied with the term intervention. I understand why that's a valid term, perhaps from the point of view of professionals. You understand what some of you are shaking yes, no. Some of you, or I should say, what an intervention is in the work that you do. The general public does not know what an intervention is. The average volunteer does not know what an intervention is. And I mentioned in my email, it's come to be a very dramatic thing, right? It has this very dramatic meaning in the US, thanks to some television shows where people knock on your door and say they're staging an intervention and you need to go to drug rehab or whatever it is. So quite seriously, if I say to the average person, I do interventions, even animal assisted interventions, that just they have no concept of what that is. So I would like to see a term that's more, let's call it user friendly. When I talk to the public about what I do, what my organization does, I have a very short amount of time to explain to them what we do. There's not a whole lot of bandwidth there for them to listen. And if I start with animal assisted intervention, I think I lose them just from the start, really. So a term that means something to the public for what I do, I don't know for what all of you do as professionals, how important it is that the general public understands that, but for what volunteers do, it's got to be something that the general public understands. I believe there should be a term for what volunteers do, whether it's animal assisted volunteer or something else. Again, just to describe what we do very simply. There are Pet Partners had, before COVID started, 15,000 volunteers, I think, I don't know if that was in the US or in some other countries too. I know they lost quite a few volunteers, and there are other organizations too. I don't want to discount the other organizations with volunteers. But this is really a growing field. We have so many inquiries every year from people who want to volunteer with their animals that I want to make sure the volunteer aspect is considered, and that I call our members in our organization the most professional volunteers I know, because we are all registered as Pet Partner handlers, and that means we've been trained. We have passed an evaluation with our animals. Every 2 years, we need to pass that evaluation again with our animals. We are insured, we have continuing education we can take. So I guess I want to legitimize that volunteer work that's done by people who are trained, registered to do this, as opposed to, I know that many nursing homes or senior living environments allow people to just bring their pets in to visit family members, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I just want to remember that what we're doing is this activity or this thing that has become quite large over the years, right? Quite a few people are involved in this, and we need to remember that. So as I said, I was not good at coming up with terminology that I would recommend, but that term intervention for what we do, no, that's just not appropriate for what we do. And I do agree with what several of you have said. I was taught years ago, and I keep saying years ago because I started with this when Pet Partners was the Delta Society 20 years ago. And I too was taught originally that animal assisted therapy is goal directed, right? Goal oriented, measurable, supervised or done by a professional, whereas animal assisted activities were what I do, those more informal things. So that's pretty much what I have to say in my input.
Excellent, thank you. Any comments or thoughts?
I would like to say that with a lot of respect to what you're doing, I want to elaborate on that from what I understand from Pet Partners, there is some sort of training. You don't want just somebody coming off the street with a dog. And right. I think it's really important that the people doing the visiting have respect for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Together with what I'm always screaming about, I think every single person who does any sort of intervention, practice, whatever we decide to call it, whatever. Everyone has to have a professional modesty. I don't know how to do animal-assisted occupational therapy. I don't even know how to do animal-assisted education. They don't know how to do what I do. And I think, if you can help the people doing the visiting, yes, you have had some training that doesn't make you a therapist, but no. What you are doing is very important, and that they should respect it, and it should be emphasized.
I would never say that I'm doing animal assisted therapy. I'm not a therapist. I'm not an educator. I'm not, I actually come from the high tech world. I worked in the software world before this. This is so far removed from what I did before. And, the majority, I'll speak for and we use the term team, that's one handler and one animal. I'll speak for what our teams do in Colorado, because I don't know for Pet Partners nationwide. the majority of what we're doing is that animal assisted activity, right? We're visiting hospitals, nursing homes. Even when we're going to schools or libraries, we might not be working with a professional on an educational goal. We do have some people, however, working with teachers, right, in documented programs. We do have some people going to rehab facilities with their animals and working with an occupational therapist to, on activities with the animal. So there's some of that going on, but yeah, the vast majority is those casual, informal things. And are they goal oriented? Well, yeah, we think we have
they
a
are
goal, right? We
goal-
want to make you feel better,
are
but I don't survey you afterwards and ask you if you went from a 1 to a 10 because my dog
They
came
are
over,
goal oriented.
right?
Supposed
But
to a
that's
birthday party.
that's the
Supposed
stuff
to a
that
birthday
is
party, yeah.
growing. I mean, they're in the US. I don't know about other, there are airport dogs, right? There are dogs at the airports
In
visiting
India, they have
people.
airport dogs.
We have airport dogs here. The Denver International Airport has an enormous, program of dogs. We're asked to go more and more places every year. And I just bring that up so we remember what a large field this is. And we would never step on your toes as the professionals and say that what we're doing is what you are doing.
No, that wasn't my point at all.
Yeah, no, I
This is
understand,
what they're
absolutely.
doing.
I just want to
Yeah.
reiterate, I have great respect for all of you and your training and your education and what you do. And I'm not saying what I do is the same. Go ahead,
Can I
Michael, please.
quickly throw in something? That was really nicely done, Laura. I really, really appreciated your presentation. And Nancy, I also know what you're talking about. I do think we need to go back to, I think what you started with, Laura, is the general public and what the general public understands. I would make a bet that the shift nurse at the nursing home where the pet partner teams show up still is referring to it as pet therapy. We're having pet therapy this afternoon. And no
Yeah,
matter how we describe it, no matter how we try to do it, and the same is true with therapeutic riding too. And unfortunately, it very quickly becomes riding therapy. Oh yes, my child has riding therapy, when in reality, it's a therapeutic riding instructor teaching a lesson. And I don't, I think we can try, we could be hopeful, we could be optimistic, but we also can't get too narrow within ourselves with the terminology in general. I think it's got to be good enough. And I don't think we're going to hit on everybody's needs, but volunteers are a huge part of our field and they definitely need to be included and recognized.
and for the general public, they may never deal with you. They may never hear your terminology or know what that is. But the number of people who have had an interaction with one of our handlers somewhere where their child has or their mother has, right? That's absolutely enormous, actually. And I just want to say one thing, this is a little offhand, but with all of you describing what you do therapeutically and whether or not you have the term animal assisted or animal whatever in your what you do, I don't know, as a layperson, I would find it really appealing to come work with one of you in any therapeutic form if I knew animals were involved versus being someone who maybe knows I need some kind of therapy and I don't really want to go. But I see that you use animals in your work. That's going to be a lot more appealing to me. So just a note there.
Michael, I would like to answer what you said, that I think if we're sure among ourselves, and I'll take the example of the therapeutic riding instructors, if the therapeutic riding instructors are also able to say, I am not providing therapy, I'm doing something else that's very important, then we can all educate the public eventually.
Ideally.
But we have to start with ourselves first.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and we don't need to belabor it, there is an element within therapeutic horsemanship where people are kind of almost misrepresenting what they're doing, where brochures state that we do therapy when there's no therapist on staff. And that is something the field needs to address, and we need to really hold ourselves and each other accountable.
I wish we had a therapeutic riding instructor part of this group. It might help.
And just one more quick thing, I will say the conversations I have with the public, because I meet so many people, right, when I'm out and about doing my volunteer work, and many of them bring something up about therapeutic riding or whatever it is. And I actually have it actually opens a lot of conversations to the general public about the work that is done with animals by therapists and people like me. And it's kind of interesting. And we spend a lot of time educating the public about what we do, about what you do, about the difference between a therapy animal, an emotional support animal, a service animal. That's a big one. I spend a lot of time on that one. So we know, one of the reasons I'm involved in this, aside from wanting to bring the volunteer point of view, is even though we are not professionals, we try to always use the correct terminology. And when a facility or a program might inquire about our availability to do a certain kind of thing, it might be something we cannot do, but we try to direct them to the correct person. We get a lot of calls from people because our name is Denver Pet Partners. What does that mean to the public? We get calls about all kinds of things, right? Sometimes people with children on the autism spectrum call, where can I send my son to work with an animal? Where can I do this or that? So we really try to stay on top of what is going on, even in the professional world, so we can contribute in that way too.
Thank you so much. And I know we have just over a half hour, so I want to make sure to get everybody their opportunity. Does somebody want to go next? Okay, Bridget?
Yes, thank you. Could you please share my Excel sheet with the others?
Sure. Let me just, I just have to pull it up here. Hold on. Sorry, it'll take me like 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. As an introduction, like I said last time, I am looking for, I prefer to have a model that is merely simple instead of very complicated. So when I was reading all the papers and the sheets and listening to the introductions and reading the emails, I thought, oh, where is this going to lead? Because it's a lot of different opinions, different solutions, different suggestions. And I thought we have to create a model to understand each other. So that's what I tried to put in an Excel sheet. And I think two things are very important. One is, does the public understand what we are doing? And the second is, I'm a researcher.
Is it this one here?
I'm working on my doctorate. So
Is this?
I'm waiting for it.
Is it? I have one up. Is this one yours?
Yeah, that's
okay.
it.
Okay, then.
So there are two things very important. First, it must be understandable for the public. And the second thing is, I am a researcher. So if we are going to change acronyms like AAI or AAA in animal assisted services, AAS, then we would have, in science, we would have a big problem, because the authors of papers, they use keywords like AAI, AAA, and that we wouldn't be able to find enough literature anymore. So that is, for me as a researcher, that is very important. It would have a huge effect. So that's the reason why I suggest that we call everything an activity, and we eliminate the second level of therapy, education, coaching, and whatever. Because in the third letter of the acronym is already indicated whether it's a therapy or not, or whether it's social work. And as a handler or as the public, I would like to know two things. What is the animal involved? Which animal is involved in the activity? And what activity is being performed? So is it psychotherapy, speech therapy? And that should be noticeable. it's obvious that when you use psychotherapy or speech therapy, that this must be evidence-based and legally embedded. You cannot use this term without a therapist on the side. As you can see, I deleted the word equine because it's misleading. Equines are more animals, horses and donkeys, and people, especially in the practical field and in research, are using it for horses only, which is very disturbing for me because I work with donkeys. If I want to know something about donkeys, then I end up in a world of horses, which is different. So I made this this table of only 2 dimensions. One is the activity, what is done, speech therapy, grief therapy, or whatever, or the programs that are being done with volunteers. And the second dimension is the animal. And that makes it very, very easy to understand. Of course, you see a lot of acronyms now in the table, but they are very clear. The H stands for a horse, the D for donkey, the C for canine, and the A, the second letter, is for assisted. That means that the therapist or the handler or the program leader or the director of the session is using animals, is integrating animals in the practice. That's it. And so I'm against all the discussions about, shall we call this a therapy? Shall we call this education or not? Just say what you are doing, and that's the activity. And then the umbrella term, of course, will be animal assisted activities. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts or comments on that?
That's coming from a totally different, Meg, going, you want to go first? I saw you started.
No,
Okay.
no.
You had a yellow line. Okay. Well, then I think somebody like me, who I have my dog and my 2 birds and my 3 lab rats and my hamsters. And, actually, for instance, the way we practice in Israel is the whole idea there's an animal, and different animals can represent different things at different times and maybe used in different ways by different children at different stages in the therapy. I can understand, and I think this goes into maybe what I'm going to say when it comes to be my turn. I think that we have to think, and that's it's an idea that I developed today within this discussion. I think we should have a number of purposes, looking inwards towards the people who are practicing these professions and outwards towards the public. I'm thinking of a book here.
As you know, what we have been doing and what we have been demonstrating until now is very interoceptive. We are very much trying to explain to ourselves how we are going to use terminology. It makes it needlessly complicated. So the second step will be, okay, now we are going to explain it to the public. That wouldn't understand. People wouldn't understand what we were doing. So that's the reason why I said you don't worry about the level of the activity being therapy. For instance, I study mindfulness with donkeys. So my activity is donkey assisted mindfulness. And some people call that a therapy and others don't. I don't care. I really don't care, because I want to demonstrate what the effects are of donkey assisted mindfulness. Donkeys are included, no other animals, and we practice mindfulness and nothing else. If in your case, Nancy, if you are working with multiple animals, you can state that your service is animal assisted activity. And if you are going into detail, it's animal assisted psychotherapy, or sometimes you work with dogs, then it would be canine assisted therapy. So I think that the last word in the acronym should show what we are doing. And the first word should show what animal is involved. Multiple animal is animals. Javier.
Well, if I had the opportunity, yes, I think that we're discussing, we're debating, and that's great. I think that it's really interesting to have a group focused on this. No, I've been listening to you, to Laura and Brigitte, and I think that the word that I wanted to discuss about is strategy. We are thinking about including changes or proposing changes. We are doing this because to do with general population. We want more clarity, and we want people to know what we are doing. And other questions has to do with practitioners or professionals. I say practitioners, but I mean every professional that works or volunteer that works within animal-assisted interventions or programs or services, or whatever we want to call this. And researchers also. And if we want people to know on the field to work better, I think that we also have to speak about mechanism. It is. I listened to you, Brigitte, and you decided to include many different levels to express if you are working with a concrete species. And for me, perhaps because I work in a different field, I don't know, I would say that for me, the concrete species is not that relevant in most occasions. I mean, perhaps someone wants to work with dogs, and the bond that they create is going to help this person to ameliorate or to go faster in the work that she is doing or he is doing. But other people may prefer to work with cats. If the human-animal bond is what is implied, is has to do with the mechanism, is the component that is included. For me, working with cats or including dogs or donkeys is not that important. For me, it is different if you are including horses or donkeys, because people will be on top of them, because if you are going to make rehabilitation with horses, then you are including the movement, the physical characteristics of horses in the equation, and thereby speaking about horses is important, right? But when things have to do with relationship or bond that is created between the end non is not that important, because it has more to do with the preferences and experience of the concrete client that with the animal by.
You know, I don't agree, because I don't agree. I think people have preferences for some animals, and the effects of the therapeutic involvement of animals is also different. So because of the different species, because of the different way some animals act, and because of the different protocols that are being used. So if I'm speaking about, let's say, the donkey-assisted mindfulness that I'm studying, it's very difficult to perform that with rats, for instance. So the pet rats. So you cannot see it as one of a kind.
Yeah, and I think that's all.
If you think that, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, but if it is the case, Brigitte, then we should have an hypothesis of how we are going to explain this to other practitioners. I mean, I don't know the work that you develop, but when I include dogs or cats or any other animals, as I said, I may include them because I want that the bond help me to create better relationship, to improve narratives or expectation, or perhaps to improve some techniques. But the truth is that
well, of course, then
I
you
don't
work
think
with
that
multiple animals. Is that correct? You work with multiple animals, and that would mean that you perform animal assisted
but
activities.
what I want to say is that that for me, of course, I'm pretty sure that everyone here works with include animals. Perhaps you work just with donkeys, or perhaps you may include a different species like Nancy does. But at the end, if we think that there's something about the species that is going to create a different effect, we have to explain this, because it doesn't matter that we speak about donkeys or cats or dogs. Every dog is different. Every dog may have a different range of behaviors. Of course, all dogs share some behaviors that can be different to cats, but at the end, I'm going to try to explain the changes, because dogs are dogs and do dogs things. I'm not prepared to speak like this, because at the end, I think that if people can improve, it is because the program, the therapy or educational or whatever program is doing something, and it has to do also with the strategy that we could follow in front of general population. When people ask me what is this thing of animal assisted therapy or animal assisted education, I only speak about psychotherapy because I'm a psychotherapist. I'm not prepared to speak about any other thing, like Nancy said. I always answer the same. I said, well, animal assisted therapy is exactly the same psychotherapy that every other psychotherapist does, but foster, improve, empower with human-animal interaction, bond, or whatever you want to call this. So I'm doing the same evidence-based work, but foster with some extra component. And I think that that's a good idea. Perhaps we don't need to remove all the terms, but perhaps we should start speaking and explaining this when we publish a paper or we publish a handbook or something like this. Well, we can speak of this like animal assisted interventions or therapy, but at the end, they don't exist. It is the same old-fashioned evidence-based work that we always did, but improve, including animals. That would be a strategic approach that I try to use.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different approaches here. I know exactly what Trevor is talking about. He probably knows what I'm talking about, but we're talking about, I think, different therapy approaches, different techniques, different goals, something specific, something general, and
yeah, I think that's what I also mentioned in the Excel sheet, that it's not about the role of the animal. That's another discussion.
yeah.
So
Exactly.
we can table this one. Like, just, I mean, we're limited. I'm so sorry. Like, we're limited in time, and I know there's still a few people who have not presented. So can we put this, table this discussion for either if we have time at the end or for our next meeting? Are you okay with that?
My table, Amy?
Yes. Do you mind if we take this conversation about whether the animal specific or species specific topic, can we hold that while everyone finishes? Okay. So we'll park that until either after or the next meeting, and then I want to make sure everyone has a chance today to finish theirs. So, so we have Debbie, Mariana, Meg. Any of you want to share yours?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Amy, I'm going to need your help because I'm on a phone. My laptop died. Could you put up my first animal related services chart, and then I'll put up that second one that I just emailed you, if you wouldn't mind. But if you wouldn't mind just putting up the animal related.
Yep, let me call it up here. I have it into there. Is it a Word? I thought it was a PDF. Okay, so it should be right here.
I think it's a PDF in the group Dropbox thing initially.
Is it this one right here?
There it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to fit in.
Here, let me see if I
was just looking for a general term to try to explain to all my students and the colleagues about what stuff is and what stuff isn't. So I needed to refer specifically to. I very much like the terms AAA, AAE, AAT and AAC. I think I would be concerned about going backwards for me. What I was most interested in clarifying is what is included in animal-assisted therapy and all the different specifics, because I think it's completely different if someone's doing occupational therapy compared to someone that's doing physiotherapy or someone that's doing psychotherapy. And I think that that needs to be well noted and named. But my specific interest has been in the very beginning from the basics. Anyway, it's changed since talking with all of you. But from the very beginning, from the basics, what I needed to do was put all those empty bubbles down the side that clarified what animal-assisted A, C, E, and T was not. So it's not dog training, it's not horse training, it's not training therapy animals, it's not, studying zoology at uni, et cetera, all the things that, and also assistance dogs. It's not purchasing or getting a grant for an assistance dog. So you can see that my diagram is very particularly oriented to defining animal-assisted interventions. I don't have a problem with that from an animal-assisted therapy point of view, because I think most therapists understand what the word intervention is. So that was my first endeavour. I can just leave that there. And I was just trying to find a term that would include everyone, because I didn't want to be excluding all the other animal-related things that happen in the world, in Australia particularly. But they certainly aren't a facilitated process. And for me, if I'm talking about an animal-assisted coaching, an animal-assisted education, an animal-assisted activity, or an animal-assisted therapeutic with one of the specific therapy professionals, then for me it's a facilitated process, and it doesn't include visits and things that we've been talking about. So that's when I came, there's an argument about it fitting under animal-assisted activities. So that's kind of broadly where I think I just put everything that I don't really know what to do with at this point in Australia. But Amy, if you wouldn't mind putting up the second little chart that I just emailed you.
Sure, let me look that up.
Because my thinking has changed by being exposed, because I think initially my interest was just clarifying what is an animal-assisted process and what's not, hence my original diagram. And what I had been curious about, and I know we don't want to create more complexity, but what I was curious about was, could we create something different for interactions? And so I know the whole discussion, obviously we're not going to be agreeing necessarily, but I actually do quite like to distinguish between animal-assisted interventions, which I've put on the left there as animal-assisted services, just because of some of the discussions from last week. I just made this up, 3 days ago. So that we still got under the animal-assisted services or the animal-assisted interventions, I quite like, but because it does fit AAT quite fine, which is my area. But what I was wondering is whether, because I'm not working with the human-animal bond per se, but clearly when people, when Laura was talking about pet partners and other people are doing visitations, and there's volunteers doing work, and there's people with assistance dogs, I'm wondering whether all that actually is related to the human-animal interaction, and whether that could be grouped quite separately out from, let's say, animal-assisted interventions on my left that I've called services, because I was dabbling with that word that someone said last week or last meeting about animal-assisted human services and animal-assisted services, but animal-assisted interventions for me is fine on the left, and then on the right, human-animal interactions that include everything that's not a facilitated process. And then you can see that on the right, the far right, I've got a whole category of animal training for human-animal services or human-animal interactions or whatever. You know, I'm not so attached. I'm interested in the division, in the distinction, in the broad distinction. So on the right, I've put animal training because I have a concern about assistants or animal handlers or animal assistants being included in definitions of animal-assisted therapy. If I'm doing, I mean, I don't include handlers, so it's not something I do, but if I was including an assistant, a horse assistant or an animal assistant or an animal handler team, then I would, they're assisting my service. They don't belong in the animal assisted therapy or the animal assisted psychotherapy that I'm providing. They're either an assistant, or they're a dog trainer, or they are a volunteer that's been trained in relating to their particular dog, so et cetera, but they're an assistant. So for me, they're not part of the definition in that way. So I am very interested in defining at least 3 very broad areas that start to distinguish out the animal-assisted interventions that are facilitated interventions from the human-animal interactions, from the actual animal trainers. So that's my little piece.
Great. Any quick thoughts or comments on that? Okay.
And it's a very unique, I don't know if it's unique at all or if it's the same, because Michael said it's somebody else just said before it's similar. But in Australia, everything is a big mishmash. And yes, even the basic terms of animal-assisted therapy, even though it's not, I want to define that and say, well, actually, out of the 10 professionals, what are you talking about? You know, we're talking about occupational therapy. We're talking about speech therapy. Are we talking about counseling and psychotherapy? Are we talking, that's really essential. Like, it's a no-brainer for me that we would want to have that clear. But for me, I need to pull back and say, well, actually, there are broad areas that shouldn't be mixed. And they're my kind of, I'm not attached to terminology per se, but I need to be clear that I'm here because I want to really help our community discern between a dog trainer or a service animal, assistance dog, and a volunteer that's supporting someone in a nursing home, and a professional that's actually facilitating a process that has therapeutic goals or educational goals that's being assessed and processed. You know, they belong to a peak body that is governing them and their work, like Javier, or I might say that word wrong, sorry, apologies, was saying, you know, it's the profession that is included, that where the animals are included. So that's my broadest interest, is in distinguishing all of it, but absolutely clarifying between those at least 3 broad areas of interactions and interventions and trainers, dog animal trainers.
It's a good point. Okay, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, no, it is interesting. Michael, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. Yeah, no, I just had a point for a minute. Oh, because when you had brought up the first document, like all that on the side was like HAI related stuff, right? Which actually, so when I created that little piece, it was from yours. Like, it seemed like all that stuff fit well under there. But I like that you have the profession specific, and then if you're a dog trainer, like your goals, if we're going all the way back to goals, your goals are to train the dog, not to improve, do benefits that improve human outcomes, right? So they're not going to be in the same scope of practice. So it's nice how it's set up this way. And I know we have Mariana. Debbie said you were okay, so I want to make sure that you have a chance. Mariana, do you want to?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, sorry, because I'm living in a farm and I have many problems with the communication, but I hope it functions now. May I share screen? Well, I'm from Argentina. I'm a professor at the University of La Plata. I'm also a wine specialist from Iagala and research and private practice. For me, well, in my country, the term intervention, the more common use. I understand the problem to use this word in another country like the United States. So for me, it's not a problem to change because in our country, it's not so popular this kind of approach to work with. But there are many groups that are working on this, and they usually use the terms therapy assisted with animals, dogs, and horses, more common, animal assisted education, and animal assisted activities, animal assisted recreation. And we also have the problem that in Spanish, you use first actividad instead of in English that you put at last. So perhaps we have problems with that. When we describe the activities only with the letters. So many times I want to think about the letters because we spoke in another order that words. But well, some examples that I take from places that use intervention in my country, and you can see that the word intervention is the more common. And I agree with the presentation of Daniela that talk about that who are going to do the activities. And in our country, the animal-assisted activities are more common to do with a duo of, for example, a dog and a technician in intervention. Usually, the technician have some preparation to work with intervention. And when we talk about animal-assisted education, we usually find a duo, like dog and technician, some specialists in education, like a teacher, and if it's a group, perhaps we have more duos together. In therapy, the more common is to work in psychotherapy with a duo, for example, a dog technician or horse and technician, or a group of horse. And coaching, we usually use in our country coaching with horses. We don't use the word assisted, but everybody knows that is what is or what are going to happen in a coaching with horses. You are going to find a coach, sometimes another person is a equine specialist, but sometimes the coach is also a equine specialist. You have the horses, and you have, if you have a group of people, we usually find volunteers. But we have the problem here that we haven't got, or we have too many places to form in these areas, but all of them use different programs. They have different goals. So it's very difficult to find only one program to form a volunteer. So you have find many kinds of volunteers, from students from the university and that people that like animals, for example. And I think the most different thing I thought about the terminology is this, because at the university we work as a team with a psychology, a veterinarian, teachers, all together. So in our approach, we think the sessions with the education. But for example, we have the longest lockdown in the world in our country. So we work with children, didn't go for a whole year. So when they came to work, we also work at La Plata racetrack that give us a place to work, and we work with horses and dogs at the same time. So the children first work perhaps with horses and then work with the dogs, but in the same session. We work for 2 hours and a half. And we prepare to work with education of these children, and we also work with his teacher. But the first thing we saw is that the children will touch the horses, the dogs. They want to hug the animals. So for us, we prepare all the session to work in education, but the session turns to be psychologically, because they have the need to be in touch with someone because of the longest lockdown. So, and this happens many times because we work always as a team and with the two species, and sometimes another, like a sheep, for example. And you can see the girl hold the sheep. He wants to be in touch. So for me, it's important to think about activities that perhaps have two main goals. For example, education, and also hold spaces for these children that have, for example, no possibility to keep in touch with no one because of the lockdown. So I think I don't want to have another word for this, but I propose to think about this, because we noticed that we have an holistic approach, although we don't propose to do that, but because of the situation. So for us, many times, for example, in that school, we have children that have problems of many problems that they couldn't go with another. They go with I don't know how to say, with a therapist to the class. So for these children, it's also be therapeutic to came to our activity because they could come and take a part of the activities. So many times we think we are in the middle of the three activities in this kind of work as a team and in a place with many cities and in the situation now post lockdown of because of the COVID pandemic. And I also agree with the proposed about the training organizations and the terms. We have in Argentina many places to learn about equine therapy, but mostly dedicated to physical recovery. So when common people talk about animal-assisted therapy, think about equine therapy only, because we have many places in all Argentina to have this possibility. So for us, we need to separate the term equine therapy from physical recovery, that the possibilities that give us the other things you are talking about. And we also have problem with the certification. I told you that we have too many and too many different kinds of. So, and there is also not very common to find courses at the university. So the certification came from private practitioners that give the certification. So that is a problem for us too. And finally, we wanted to share with you that during the pandemic, we work a lot with sessions by Zoom. And a lot of people prefer this way. And I don't know if for us, it works perfect as people be in the ground with the horses. This is my work with the horses. So also the horses keep in touch with the people through the phone. So I don't know if this kind of intervention or interaction must have another definition. I share with you and give me some opinion about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there any thoughts or comments that anyone would like to bring up? I know our time is up, so do we want to discuss anything else or talk about next steps? What do you think?
I have a question, Amy. I just want to go back, and wonderful presentation, Mariana. Thank you so much. Your work sounds very interesting. I want to just maybe quickly thumbs up, thumbs down on the animal specific terminology, because that came up before. We were going to talk about it. We're not going to have time, but I would love to see generally how people feel about it.
Okay.
Sorry, what do you mean, Michael?
Oh,
You're on mute.
We can't hear you.
Brigitte talked about the different animals, donkey assisted, rat assisted.
Oh, yeah, which animals?
It is helpful to split terminology to that level of the individual animal.
Yeah.
That's my question. Do we think this is helpful, or do we have issues with that thumbs up, thumbs down?
I wonder if next time we could maybe just talk about each of the new and different terms we brought up and kind of vote on all of them.
I would say at a different stage. Not at this stage, but there might be at a different stage would be interesting and helpful. But I would say later on, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth discussion too. This is kind of what I came up with, and you're welcome to switch this around. Like for next steps, we could, in the meantime, here are all the notes that I did. So if you want to just go through those at some point and add anything that I missed or whatnot, and then we can determine, let's see, find some kind of agreement. I think it'll be a little bit easier initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we find where we are in agreement and kind of move that part forward, and then we can always address the parts that are like the sticking points a little bit later. So if you can kind of go through which presentations were you like, yeah, that really fits, or part of this and part of this, and we can start coming to a consensus prior to the next meeting. So then you
We
can
still have Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie said that she didn't have to present because she was going to go over, but not that I would want to leave Debbie out. She has very, very good information. And then we can set up the next meeting to discuss, the consensus, and then we can kind of begin to outline that. And then, so if we want to meet next month, we can do that. And then we can, at that meeting, we can review where there's agreement. And then I added the discussion to include animal species in the definition, or if we want to address that a little later, begin the outline of a proposal or work, and then we can break into groups and kind of just begin kind of the roughing out what this proposal will look like. And I think once we start to see it in a more robust way, then we'll see where the holes are and the pieces that are glaring. So am I missing anything? Is there anything that you think needs to be in there beforehand?
Well, if I had the opportunity, I would say that perhaps before we, I think that we should write down what the big question is. I mean, what would we like to solve? Right, because for me there are different problems here, and for me perhaps the term, how we can solve the problem with the term will come later, that deciding which strategic aim, what we want to solve, because I think that one of the questions that we have to solve is that we lack clarity, and adding new terms, changing terms will lead us to provide more clarity, or perhaps we should start thinking about a different strategy. I mean, because perhaps we discussed about may different animals lead us to different effects by themselves or not. Perhaps we should start thinking about which mechanisms are rely beneath the animal-assisted interventions or services, because perhaps we are thinking about different things. So we won't be able to come to an agreement, because I have the impression that some of us think yes and other things no. And I think that perhaps, I don't know who is right or and wrong, but we should discuss about how we understand what we are doing. And I have the impression that although everyone here works, including animals, perhaps we are not speaking about the same, and we don't feel that the challenge is the same. For me, that I'm a psychotherapist and also researcher, clarity is really important, because if we lack clarity, we don't have validity, and without validity, other colleagues won't be able to accept what we can do. And even if things work, if you are not able to explain why things work, is something that is hard for us to include, no, within evidence-based disciplines. So for me, that's the main problem. Everything goes around the mechanism before terms or even definition. That's my opinion.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you think that needs to be included here, or that we should bring up? Okay. So you should all have this. It's in the folder in the same drive that we've been in, and it's under minutes and agendas. So it'll say minutes from 319. So if you at some point, like I said, you have access to edit it. So if I misspoke about something that you said, or if I didn't catch something that you said, just add it in there, and that'll help us out, and we can meet again. Do we want to meet next month, or does that seem too soon, too far?
I think so.
Okay, so do we want to stay on the same, or Saturday's okay?
Great.
Okay, and I know some of you, like Debbie and Meg, you've had to, and I'm not sure, Javier, what your time is, but I want to be respectful so that we don't get the good times and you guys have to be up in the middle of the night. So, you too, Nancy. So
I'm used to getting up in the middle of the night when I give lectures in the States.
So I want to make sure, and so what time? Let's start with like Meg or Debbie. Sometime that would be. I'm not sure your time zone either, Mariana, but wherever we can not make you guys get up in the middle of the night.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I always do that, so that's not a problem for me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just want it to be
I mean,
fair.
I would love it if it was 2 hours later, that's for sure. But it
Okay.
may not work for other people because from my 5 a.m. to my 7 a.m., which is very reasonable, 7 a.m. in the morning, might turn into somebody else's something worse. So I'm not sure what that means
Fine
for the
with
group.
me.
So I can call up. Let's see. We have I think it's a time zone converter. Unless we can always start from right now and figure out what we want to do, but this might be easy too. All right, so we start with, you're Melbourne, right? Melbourne, Australia? And
Yep.
we can add, what's the other one to add? How do I add it?
Hong Kong.
Okay, Hong Kong. Where's my other, oh, another city. Duh, it's right in front of my face. Okay, Hong Kong. And then where else? Daniela, or Javier, you said Spain, right? Where in Spain?
Spain, yes.
What city? Or just, is Spain all one?
Oh, wait,
Spain,
somehow you
everything is
have
the same.
Melbourne at
We are
2:30
a
a.m.
small country.
Okay, just making sure. All right, so I know, let's see. Brigitte, what's your... Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, you're muted.
Do you realize you put Melbourne as 2:30 in the morning?
I
Well,
will be not in the Netherlands by that time.
We can change that. This could be... yeah,
Like
I'll figure out
7.
the time. I just want to add all the
okay.
cities. So
I will
Daniela?
be in the same as Spain, Madrid, in the
Okay,
same
great.
time zone.
Okay, Daniela?
I'm Eastern US,
Okay.
Boston.
Okay, Boston. And then I know we have Israel. Are you IDT or IST right now?
We're going to change this Friday night, so go daylight saving time.
Okay. And then, let's see, Hong Kong. Mariana, where are you?
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Okay. All right, so there's our times. I think Michael's Eastern, I'm Eastern. Laura, you're Eastern too?
I'm Mountain, this Laura, Mountain.
Yeah, Mountain.
So what a mess.
Yeah, so right, so good luck with all this. Okay, so if we make it
We got 7.
7 a.m. here. Okay, so 7 a.m. Does this look right?
I can do it.
I didn't put Eastern time. Okay. So what does that look like? So it's worse. Well, Hong Kong, that's still early for you. And yeah, Nancy, that you too.
I'm fine.
And how about you guys at 9 p.m.? Are you okay with 9 p.m.?
Okay.
Yes, I have a baby of 10 months old, so for me 9 is I will be 2 hours awake in this moment.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that, okay, so we'll say, so I'm going to just screenshot this so I don't lose it. And I'll put it in the
But you said PM or AM? PM.
PM. Oh yeah, it'll be
Ah.
nighttime.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then
Right, so if
that's right.
everyone-
That's right.
All right, so if anyone wants me to adjust it one way or another, I mean, do we want an hour? Well, later means midnight for Nancy. So
I'm fine. I'm used to it.
okay, so are we good with these times right here?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to say April 16th? That's, I think, 4 weeks.
I can't. I have, yeah, I have a course in that week. A week later is no problem.
I said
Yes,
April
and
20th.
I don't know if it is the same in Argentina, but here in Spain we have one of the a week that is free, the Holy Week. So
Yes.
it's just in the
So do I. So do I.
también es Semana Santa, ¿no?
Yeah, sí.
So is there another day? Do you want to do Friday instead, or is Saturday still better?
In the same
Saturday,
week.
for me, Saturday is better.
Okay.
I don't know the rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we said Saturday the 23rd, is that better than the 16th, 23rd?
Yes.
Yes, for me it's better.
Okay, so we'll say the 23rd, and then for me, what do I? Oh, Denver. So it's 4 p.m. for me. Okay. All right, so awesome. Thank you, everyone. This was extremely, extremely helpful, interesting, some really good conversation, and I look forward to seeing you guys in a month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, thank you.